My invitation is for everyone to really understand, embrace, and accept that we're in a relationship with money, right? What we came here to do, create, craft, our purpose, our passions, is with material resources, money being one of them. Let's talk about money as a social technology. And then I really, early on in the book, give people a tool to dive into understanding what's the nuance, what's the flavor, what's the feeling in that relationship to money, which is sitting down and having a conversation with it. The power of enough is a human birthright, right? Mm-hmm. That as humans, we have the possibility of really getting clear on how we discern the use of any and all resources we have at our fingertips. So satiation is different than gratitude, right? Gratitude is an awesome practice that helps us connect to our heart center to see what am I thankful for in my life. Satiation is a body, a somatic-centered practice that helps you feel into what is bringing a sense of fulfillment. At a certain level, that deeper happiness and fulfillment doesn't just come from financial strategies. It really comes from listening within and understanding what brings you a sense of fulfillment. And so ultimately, if we don't really address these emotional tendencies that we have with money, it's really hard to implement those strategies, one, and two, feel joy.
Welcome to your journey to find true tranquility with the Tranquility Magazine podcast. With your host, Jasmine Maya Royce. Today's episode featuring, you can find more information about Tranquility on our website, tranquilitymagazine.com.
Today, I'm very excited to have Elizabeth Husserl is a registered investment advisor representative, a financial advisor, and a co-founder of Peak 360 Wealth Management, a boutique wealth planning firm. She holds a BS in economics from Tulane University and an MA in East-West psychology from California Institute of Integral Studies, where she has also taught as an adjunct professor. Her experience spans nonprofit work throughout the Americas, and she is a highly sought-after speaker, having led workshops at major tech companies including Airbnb, Unit, and Google. She is also now an author of her new book, The Power of Enough: Finding Your Joy in Your Relationship with Money. So my first question is always, what is your current mantra or state of mind?
Thank you, Jasmine. That's such a great question. And I take a mantra per year, and my current one is radiant surrender. And I put those two words together on purpose. I'm someone who at times likes to control outcomes and things. And so I'm practicing really being able to discern what I can control and what I can't, and letting go of what I can't, but doing it with radiance and with joy. As you can tell, that's a theme of my life right now, is how do we bring joy to some of those harder issues? And so when I put radiant surrender together, it's a reminder to let go, but also have fun while doing it.
Oh, great understanding and a great philosophy for a year. I like that your mantra 1 year to kind of focus on, and words have power and meaning and the constructs behind them. I love the idea that you have the balance of relinquishing control, so to speak, when it could be difficult to not feel like you have some precedent of control in life, especially when it comes to numbers, which you to love. So in that, I am so excited about your book and the idea of the philosophy. Help me as a person create and harbor a relationship with money and fall in love with the idea of money.
So that's a great question. So I think the first thing is just that piece is to first, my invitation is for everyone to really understand, embrace, and accept that we're in a relationship with money, right? It's often kind of like that white elephant in the room, the thing that we're in a relationship with, but we haven't been taught how to be in relationship with. And that means we haven't been taught how to communicate with it, how to digest our feelings and emotions, how it actually works, right? There is a lot about financial literacy that's really important. And by all means, learn what money is, how it works, how to use it. But equally important is how to be in relationship with it. Because what ends up happening, Jasmine, is that I find that a lot of the clients that I work with, we can have all these strategies and we can map out this most amazing financial plan, and then the emotion pops up and that's what gets in their way, right? We have analysis paralysis and they shut down and nothing happens. They get angry at what, how money's been used in relationships and in potentially their family of origin. And so they're angry at money, or they're disgusted at money, or they're grasping too hard to it. And so ultimately, if we don't really address these emotional tendencies that we have with money, it's really hard to implement those strategies, one, and two, feel joy, right? And I think part of what my invitation is that our relationship with the material world, which is really important, what we came here to do, create, craft, our purpose, our passions, is with material resources, money being one of them. And when we start to situate money as one of many resources and really create a relationship where we feel like we can design how it comes in, how it goes out, how I earn it, how I spend it, invest it, save it, etc., then we start to feel more agency, more excitement, right? More possibility with it. And to that extent, more joy. And so I'm sure we'll be talking about some of the specifics on how to develop that relationship. But that's really the key piece, is to first be like, okay, I'm in a relationship with money. What does that mean? Because guess what? No one taught it to us. That's why I wrote the book, right? Like no one taught us how to be in relationship. If anything, we have more financial literacy, but it's kind of like we're in this arranged marriage of sorts. And we've never gotten the skill set to be in the arranged marriage. And so that's kind of how I hold it.
It's a profound statement, and also the understanding how you started with your book and explaining, this is this person that you need to see and you've been dying to meet them, and all
Right.
the emotions that you kind of dissect into being shame, excitement, fear, vulnerability, and all these emotional aspects that kind of dig deep to figure out who this person is and mirror yourself by it, which was so deep to understand. And I was laughing to myself thinking about this quote that I heard, and I do not remember the source, but it's, money is like a relationship. The less you pay attention to them, the more likely they are to leave you.
Yeah. Or to be like, I'm going to go hang out with those people who are paying attention with me, right? It's like, so think of it that way. It's, we're all in some relationship in our lives with our spouses, our partners, our kids, our friends, our community, our coworkers, and think back at what are those relationships that are really thriving? What are you doing in those relationships that make it thriving? What are the ones that feel hard? What are you doing that maybe we shouldn't do so much of? And that's some of the elements that we can start to bring into the relationship with money. And I dive into that in chapter 3. Like I go straight into it. I'm like, okay, let's talk about embodied wealth. Let's talk about money as a social technology. And then I really early on in the book give people a tool to dive into understanding what's the nuance, what's the flavor, what's the feeling in that relationship to money, which is sitting down and having a conversation with it, because it's so much what that one technique can teach you about your relationship to money.
Yeah, it's very telling in a way that, our upbringing, our lack of education. I always get annoyed that, during my education, before I went into my graduate degrees and, everything like that, high school, the best class I ever took was one they focused on budgeting. And it's funny that it was the one you wouldn't think, where you would think it would be cooking classes. And they taught you how to budget and how to write checks when checks were still a thing, and kind of understand what that was. And that was the best class I ever took. And I still use it today, which I don't think it's out there. Like home ec is not a thing.
No.
Very open, but that one was my last class because I didn't need any more points, but it was the starting point that made me think about budgeting and understanding money, because it is that connection of, money being evil. Oh, it's awful, that a lot of people have, like greed is an ugly thing, but it's also part of us that we need it in order to have a fulfilled and abundant lifestyle. An abundance, or enough of abundance, is kind of where you dig in a little bit. You want to further expand on that?
Yes, but before I go there, you're bringing up such important points, Jasmine, right? And so let's talk about this idea of budgeting and economics, because economics really is the management of resources. And so if you think of budgeting, or I like kind of like spending parameters, so you're actively designing something, we can bring that the act of creating and crafting spending plans to not just money, but we can bring it to our nutrition, we can bring it to time management, we can bring it to our purpose and our work, right? And so think of it this way: as human beings, we get to design how we navigate all these different elements, right? There are different types of wealth, and budgeting allows you to have agency on how you design it. And that's the key piece, right? And because people ask me all the time, like, do I have to have a lot of money to experience the power of enough? And I tell people, no, the power of enough is a human birthright. Right, that as plans to not just money, but we can bring it to our nutrition, we can bring it to time management, we can bring it to our purpose and our work, right? And so think of it this way: as human beings, we get to design how we navigate all these different elements, right? There are different types of wealth, and budgeting allows you to have agency on how you design it. And that's the key piece, right? And because people ask me all the time, like, do I have to have a lot of money to experience the power of enough? And I tell people, no, the power of enough is a human birthright, right? That as humans, we have the possibility of really getting clear on how we discern the use of any and all resources we have at our fingertips. And it doesn't matter if the discretionary resource is small or big, you work with that number, but the act of agency, the act of actively crafting and designing is the key piece where it starts to bring a sense of empowerment to our relationship to money, right? And so again, budgeting is a key word because we budget time, we budget nutrition, calories, our social calendar, and we do that, right, to design a fulfilling life. We know what it feels like when we're overscheduled. We know what it feels like when we ate a meal that we're like, ooh, that didn't feel good. That was empty calories. Or we know what that feels like. And so bring that same awareness to your relationship to money, and to be like, I can actively create an experience where I can sense what is fulfilling and what it's not. And that's what I mean by satiation, which is a big core concept in the book.
Yes.
Is that if we start to, so satiation is different than gratitude, right? Gratitude is an awesome practice that helps us connect to our heart center to see, what am I thankful for in my life? Satiation is a somatic centered practice that helps you feel into what is bringing a sense of fulfillment, right? And so one of the easiest ways to do it is that for 30 days, you can do a satiation journal or a satiation challenge where you write down what are 3 things that satisfied you that day, things that filled you up to the core, that maybe made moments stop because you were in a flow state, or maybe just like warmed your body up or felt good, even if it was hard, like going to the gym and having an amazing workout. So you start to see what are those things that really bring a sense of fulfillment, even if it's hard work, even if it takes effort, but starts to add a sense of meaning and depth and purpose to your life. And so it's a different experience of tracking, not just what opens your heart in gratitude, but what fills you up. And if we start to build and craft a wealth map connected to fulfillment and meaning, then our wealth takes on a different expression. It's not something that we just accumulate. It is something where wealth is connected to well-being, which is its root source.
Good, like pun or connection of words and how they evolved and what the root word is. And it's always a good understanding to connect the two that have deeper meanings about the journey, like what calls to you and what is point of note. Oh, yes. Okay. So my well-being is involved in my financial wealth.
Well-being is the foundation. And so that's something that I go into in chapter 7 with the wealth mandala, is that when we start to look at wealth from that more holistic perspective, financial stability is an important part of that pie, right? It's a slice of the pie, but it's only one slice of the pie. And that's the really important piece, Jasmine, is that people get so obsessed with financial stability, right? And accumulating more and more and more. And that's the question, right? That is why I wrote this book. My question was, why is it that we have so much in our modern world, and yet we feel poor, right? We feel lack. We feel that there's not enough. And so what happens, we define wealth as the accumulation of financial resources. It keeps us stuck in a very narrow-minded view and experience of wealth. When we start to connect wealth to the satisfaction of all of our human needs, right, then we can start to see, okay, what other areas am I feeling poverty? Am I feeling lack? Do I need to address? Do I need to bring resources to? And are my strategies both monetary and not monetary? And that's really important because if I only have monetary strategies, kind of still creating a dependency on money, right? We all know what codependency in relationship feels like. But if I have financial and non-financial strategies, and guess what? I don't just depend on money for my fulfillment. And that's the key piece.
Yeah, I think while digging into your book and also what emotions will pop up in you
Yeah.
touching on that point, being very clear about that, what I guess calls you or brings you satisfaction or enjoyment and fulfillment, and what the emotions that kind of underline that. You want to
Yeah.
expound that a little bit?
Yeah. And so I'll give an example from my own life, right? Is that so one of the different human needs and part of the wealth mandala is leisure, right? And so some people can just automatically think leisure, they think travel. And that's what I used to do. I wanted to literally vacate parts of my life because they were too stressful, right? I was building, when I first started financial advising, I was building my book of business, building my clientele, super freaking stressful. And I had a toddler, right? And so I'm like, I kept telling my husband, I just need a vacation. And he at one point said, what are you trying to vacate? What are you running away from? And I was like, I'm feeling so wound up tight that I don't know what feeling off is, right? And he's like, okay, maybe that's more interesting than you trying to book a super expensive vacation that you're gonna then have to work harder to pay off, right?
Yeah.
So there's like, in terms of satisfiers, there's a negative satisfier. It's satisfying my need for leisure, but then it's creating a negative impact on my ability to go earn to pay that off. He's like, how about we figure out some times where I can take our daughter and you can really try to turn off from all the responsibilities in our home. He would draw me a bath, or I would just sit down with guided meditation and just try to come back to my core because I was trying to vacate. I was feeling overwhelmed by all of the stressors of young mom, young entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But adding a vacation as a monetary strategy to satisfy my need for leisure was creating more undue stress. And he really helped me see that. And so that's an example, is that a lot of times we will throw money at the problem, or we will feel angry if we don't have money to throw at the problem, right? And so then we get stuck in this catch 22. In reality, it can help fulfill our strategies, right? And our need. By all means, it has a role to play, but at a certain level, that deeper happiness and fulfillment doesn't just come from financial strategies. It really comes from listening within and understanding what brings you a sense of fulfillment.
Yeah, I think when you bridge the two ideas together and all the elements that I've, looked at and worked on for myself, when we talk about manifesting and abundance and all these
Yeah.
things, okay, that's great. But like into understanding where you are and how you're emotionally connected to it in a way
Yeah.
that, I was raised by my mother's an accountant and my dad is an entrepreneur. So I have those already embedded like to start with. So I got, be my own entrepreneur, but also make enough money. Otherwise, you're not making enough. So
Yeah. I mean,
important.
I'm like, that's a fascinating combination, right? Because on one hand, what first popped into my head is that an entrepreneur makes money in a cyclical manner, right? And so
Yeah.
it's not always guaranteed, like someone who's receiving income as a W-2. They get their steady paycheck. Entrepreneur doesn't have that. So sometimes that creates its own tension with money.
Yeah.
And a CPA is all about efficiency, right? Tax efficiencies. And so I'm like, there's a little bit of embedded tension and conflict in having that be the financial environment that you were raised in.
I think I got great skills in certain ways, but I do have
Yeah.
emotional connected of like, is it adequate enough? Is it enough?
Right.
Everything
Yeah.
detailed enough. And budgeting has made me very aware that I've lived in other countries, changed
Yeah.
currencies, figured out different resources outside of the box, been innovative, been original thinker in weird ways, but it's also comes back, how do I feel about that? Like, do I feel
Yeah.
like I have achieved what I needed to?
Yeah.
Or like that everyone else besides parents, you get to the point where it's like, okay, thank you, parents, for your 2 cents, but I've evolved past
Yeah.
that. But it's also their approval is always needed in your mind or out of your mind, you know?
Yeah. what I want to say, Jasmine, I so resonate and appreciate all of this share. So thank you for the personal share. It made me realize that actually my grandfather was a CPA as well. And a part
Ah.
of the efficiency, right? And I'm a financial planner. I love to track things on spreadsheets, right? I love efficiency. That's I get what you're saying. There is a joy and a wisdom to it. And I've
Mhm.
taught my daughter how to work on a spreadsheet and create a budget. And that was passed on to me through my dad's lineage. And part of writing this book was to look at the part of my lineage that felt there was never enough, right? Because you could always be a little more efficient. You could always save a little bit more, to your
Yeah.
point. And so I understand explicitly what you were saying. And I'll never forget, there was a time in my life where I had to force myself to close my computer and get off the spreadsheet,
Oh, yeah.
right? And there was moments where, like, my mantra back then, to your mantra question, was mental math is not going to solve this,
Ooh,
right?
fun.
That was like, I kept having to tell myself, I'm not going to fix it by mental math and moving things around. I
Mhm.
need to step away from my computer and feel life.
Yeah.
Right. And so I needed to bring a different center, my body center, my heart center, right? I needed to bring vitality and intimacy to balance the analytical brain that money is often situated in. That's where we're taught to engage with money, is from our mind, from analysis, from efficiency, from compounding interest, right? And in reality, and I've had people be like, oh my gosh, I'm reading your book. When do you start talking about investments? And I'm like, I actually don't talk about investment strategies in my book, partly because there's a lot of great books out there that do that. What I'm
Yeah.
really trying to add to the conversation is, can we have a relationship to money that is broader than numbers,
Mm.
right? Where we can talk about wealth. And so those mini moments that I have peppered in the book are
Yes.
questions that you can ask yourself, that you can ask a friend, a partner. We can be in dialogue with each other more about money and wealth without having to talk about numbers,
Mm.
right? Because we don't talk about money enough. And
Yes.
so when we don't, it gets stuck in this efficiency. Well, this is how I was taught to do it. This is how I think we should do it. But what if there's a different way? And, my own relationship with my grandfather and efficiency and accountability and accounting has led me to want to be like, that doesn't feel abundant, or that doesn't feel like the power of enough. So what needs to shift?
Yeah, and changing lanes in a way to
Mm,
kind of drop into a different way of doing things. Times change, like things evolve. Things that worked before don't work now. And there's an element in there under anything is that word control. I want
yes.
to control the outcomes by solving all
Yeah.
the numbers and figuring out my budget needs to go here or there to make sure
Yeah.
that I have enough for that. And then that is like an overbetting of needing or wanting to control our finances and our ability to sustain what we have or make it sustainable for the future. And
Yeah.
in that, like the longevity factor and figuring out, you have a child, what they're going to do and how they're going to invest and how they're going to feel about the gifts that you give them, about
Hmm.
making it sustainable for their future. We always give our children what we didn't have in our life. You want the best of everything that you didn't give or get, and then making it a moment that either educating them that you weren't educated by or helping them when you didn't
Hmm.
receive the help. Or it could be vice versa, that you got a lot of help and you wanted to continue that idea.
Hmm. Hmm.
But going back to one specific, I want you to kind of dig deep into the idea before I go further into this topic a little bit. You have the abundancy scarcity
Yeah.
cycle, which we mentioned fully, but what is the fulfillment, meaning fulfillment cycle and the satiation
Yes, paradigm.
paradigms?
So let's go there, because you did speak to it, right? There's a moment when you said, what we think the opposite to scarcity is abundance, right? The abundance mindset. And notice what happens, Jasmine, is that we're trying to push scarcity away and grasp onto abundance, right? And
Mhm.
notice both of those are still tense thematic postures, right? I don't necessarily feel relaxed in that. I'm grasping because I want more than to push away a feeling of lack, right?
Yeah.
Now, abundance does have a role, and it's important. And especially when it encouraged us to see the glass half full instead of half emptied. But when we start to situate that cycle of the abundance scarcity within, okay, there's a bigger, or we connect it to the cycle of meaning and fulfillment, and
Mhm.
then our view of wealth becomes broader and expand and more holistic, right? And so the invitation is for us to be like, okay, I'm not necessarily going to push that abundance scarcity cycle out. I'm going to give it its right place of helping me identify where are those areas that I'm feeling lack, right? We do feel lack in our lives, and that's important. Much like I woke up and I'm like, I'm hungry this morning, right? Or it's lunchtime and my stomach's grumbling. Lack is a neutral, it's a neutral experience that can give us important signals.
Okay.
Right. Do you see that? Like, we're very judgmental about it, right? A feeling, especially in comparison to others,
Oh, yeah.
right? My house is not as big. My, like, check out
They keep
me.
them up with the Joneses.
Exactly. And the reality is that, even if you're in that top 1%, there's still going to be someone who has more than you, right? And so part of it is that once we're able to let that go and say, okay, let me turn to this other cycle, meaning and fulfillment, and I start to pay attention to those things that bring me meaning, and I'm rooted in this paradigm where I am the one who can identify what satiates me. That is how I start to design the use of my resources. And that is really key, right? We are all economists. We are all managing resources, right? We don't have to be good at math to do that. We just have to pay attention to what feels fulfilling. And we do have to pay attention to what are all the different types of resources I have, money being one of them, right? But other resources are our relationships, right? Our connections, our creativity, our credibility. I mean, there's a whole list of different resources that I put in the book that you may be super strong in one and maybe not in your healthiest financial spot. And that's okay. Can you use some of these other resources to bring a different sense of opportunity and possibility to the financial stability or slice of your pie if that's what you're needing more help on? So I think what's really important is, again, I'll go back to this point. When we're thinking about wealth situated in the wealth mandala, right? And I use that word on purpose. Mandala is a Sanskrit word that means, it means circle, but they use it as a tool to go from suffering to joy, right?
Yeah.
And so I took the work of Maslow's needs, and then there was other economists who took the needs and put it into a matrix, and I put it into a mandala because I like circles, and it reminds me of a flower when I have clients do it. Like, it's beautifully colored, even if they have a very little bit in one of the different slices of the pie or the different needs. But what's really important is that our human needs are universal. So let's stop feeling bad about having needs. Let's just say our human needs are universal and we all have them. How we satisfy our needs is unique and personal. And that's the key difference, right? And so if I look to my need of connection and purpose, that's going to look very different than my husband's, right? For me, connection has to do also with physical touch. He feels connected when he's having the most amazing philosophical conversation. I start to shut down, right? And so, but that's his connection. He knows that's not with me. So let's make sure that he has those people in his lives who he feels connected to. But we start to understand. And so sometimes, do we have to put some resources towards that and make sure that he's going to conferences where he's with peers? Does it just mean that he's, in virtual communities where he's having a conversation? So do you see that, where you start to really get clear how each need feels fulfilled by you, and then how you start to create some strategies, sometimes bringing dollars to it, and then we have to practice non-judgmental use of that money, right? Because maybe in your physical health, you're like, I'm finally ready for that Pilates trainer, and that would feel like a total luxury that anyone who knew me or in my community would judge me for spending money on a personal trainer. But guess what? You know what I mean? It's like, but guess what? That is really where my resources will have the biggest bang for their buck in terms of fulfillment. And I'm going to do it independent of if I feel judged, because I'm choosing this as a personal satisfier.
Yeah, it kind of touched a point for me on self-worth and the idea that I had to reframe my ideas of certain expenditures for the idea that I'm investing in me. Like, I'm worth this investment for me and what I need to make sure that I am the best version of myself, to make sure that I show up and I arrive at the point where someone needs me or needs help, or I'm just working on what I love, to show up with the amount of energy and strength that is needed for that situation, that I'm present in that moment. But so those investments that I make are, for a long time, like, ooh, budget not friendly.
I love that budget not friendly. It's like,
So
ooh, red flag, red flag.
I was like, I don't know if I could like, but it's also where you're going with the idea,
Yeah,
needs and wants, kind of, I need to focus on what I need to make sure that I have enough to focus on and bringing it forward. The money to come to me in a way that I'm worth it, that I'm not feeling impoverished or
yeah,
lacking. So because
yep.
I'm highly
Mm,
creative in that, I got the rule point from the parents, budget things, and I just want to have fun and create things. And so you hear the dialogue with my dad, you'll never make money on that. Ooh, okay. So how do I prove that point wrong? Has been higher plan. But you would touch on a couple points that I've been working on myself, and they involve kind of later in your chapters when you talk about rewiring your DNA.
yeah, yeah,
And so I am in that position that I think that's versatile for a lot of people when you realize that in your history, you are the one to kind of break the
yeah.
circle
The
process.
cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so. Let me go back to, I alluded to it earlier, right? I wrote this book partly because the question I had was, why is it that there's still scarcity when, technically speaking, I was raised in an upper middle class family and we were still feeling scarcity? So the resources were there, but what's the feeling of scarcity in the household, right? And in reality, my grandfather, that was the CPA, he was from Austria, an Austrian Jew who had to leave during the Second World War because of persecution, ended up on a boat and landed in Colombia, South America without a word of Spanish and $50 in his pocket, and had to restart his life and became a CPA for a big part of the expat community, right? The European community there. And built, but always felt really scared of World War III, right? And so just saved, right?
Yeah.
Died with holes in his socks and a lumpy mattress. And I mean, I know that my story is not unique to me. There's a lot of families who have some experience of persecution or slavery or the depression, right? It impacts our lineage. And so, that got passed on to my dad. My dad was a physician in New Orleans and my mom was a therapist. And so, again, both working professionals. My dad had that steady paycheck and they were very generous in certain areas. Like my education was paid for. We would always go see my family in Colombia because that was really important to my mom. So I got to travel and see, parts of South America. But there was still that feeling sometimes of scarcity of like, oh my gosh, if I let go too much, am I putting myself in an insecure place? I mean, it's really that like, am I going to be safe if there's another world war? And then I, started my own career. And at the beginning, because I was an entrepreneur, so you would appreciate this, Jasmine, you are building a book of business and it's not, cash flow is cyclical and some months it comes in and sometimes it
Yep.
doesn't. So in my first conversation with money, which I talk about in the book, I was like, God damn it, money, where are you? Why are you not showing up for me? Right. And
Yeah.
money just like said, hey, back off, almost like back off, lady. He's like, Elizabeth, or I don't know why I said it was a he, but it felt very masculine because I was probably talking to like the men in my family. It's
Uh-huh.
like, Elizabeth, you are doing something that has never been taught to you. No one taught you how to be an entrepreneur. So here are the questions you have. Here are the people you can potentially go talk to. It's not my responsibility to teach you to be an entrepreneur, but let's go learn this together so we can start a business because I want to come into your life, but let's create those channels. And I was like, oh wow, that was not what I was expecting. And it
Uh-huh.
was the first kind of like slap in my face. I'm like, oh yeah, guess what? I've had boyfriends tell me that I hold on too tight. And so it's a relational style. And so I
Yeah.
think going back to it, I was like, okay, where is this scarcity coming from? And I just started to dig deep and talk. I mean, my grandfather, he passed when I was 8, so I didn't get these conversations with him, but with my dad, and he would tell me the story and how my grandfather would not talk about leaving Austria. It was too painful and, never went back and would just sob when watching Sound of Music. And just there's all this emotion that had not gotten digested. And so I was like, when I became a mother, I committed to not passing this on to my daughter. So
Mm.
it's been a 10-year journey of like, how do I work through the scarcity that I know is in my DNA and in my body because of loss of homeland, because of persecution, so that I do not pass this on to the next generation, right? And I'm not passing on a blind magical thinking, like it's all going to work out. No, because that's the opposite, where people are like, well, I'm just not going to look. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I've done my work. We have a family spreadsheet, we all have access to it. And we also know when to close the computer and say, okay, what is it that we need right now in our family dynamic to feel fulfillment, right? In these other areas of our lives. And so there's been times in my life where we've made some financial decisions, or like, oh my gosh, check that out. I did not feel scarcity. I did not feel fear. This is working. And
Yeah.
so that's when I know that all of the work has an impact, because I can actually make decisions about putting money out into the world and feel joy about it.
Yeah, I think in your going back to the emotions and the joy and rewiring your synapses from your ingrained childhood ideas, and it's not just you. I call it projection sometimes when it comes from other people. It's like, okay, that's inner
Yeah.
projection, inner insecurity. That's that, like my stuff or yours.
Yes.
Which one is that? And then understanding that the trauma, or big T, small t, is throughout the lineage of my, genes and where I come from, where they're from. And like you, understanding the background and immersing yourself in the idea of where you come from and who
Yeah.
defined you and where you got these ideas from and where you got these notions,
Yeah.
where you got these emotions from, and
Yep.
then how it equates to your financial well-being.
Yeah.
It's surprising and very justified that most people, including myself, that I was just starting this journey when I found your book, that I'm like, okay, how do I start to kind of rework the idea of lack, poverty, and my grandfather, an entrepreneur, lost his fortune twice over, but also came from, all my background are immigrants. So like most Americans, in that, like, we have light gestures of different countries. For the most part, I'm just European. So,
Yeah.
it is that war factor and how that equates to modern and the depression and all those elements that are different points in time that people remember having nothing, no bread on the table, no home, no area, no cultural understandings, being alienated in a new environment, and all those things
Yeah.
that have that desperation in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're describing all of that, Jasmine, I'm like, oh my gosh. And what is the list of qualities that your ancestors had
Mhm.
that got them to have you, that you're standing here having this conversation with me? Like I'm listening, I hear resilience, I hear creativity, I hear probably maybe frugality in some capacities, right? And so what are these qualities? And I think that's part of the beauty of writing our money stories, both our personal ones and also our
Yes.
ancestral stories, is that you can look back and you're like, yes, there's definitely some trauma that needs to be healed and some shadow work, right, in all of our
Yeah.
families.
Hmm.
But what are some of also those golden nuggets of resources that we can
Yeah.
harness and harvest and take forward? Because I think sometimes people are like, okay, you know what, Elizabeth, I just don't want to do that emotional digging. I'm like, okay, you can keep it. You can keep it, like turn the dial up as much as you want. But I
Hmm.
think if you do take a moment to go back and say, okay, yes, I'm aware of this trauma that was there, but let me go digging for some of those resources that I do want to cultivate and pass on to the next generation, that is also part of your financial DNA as well.
Yes.
Right. And take that, right? Like for my husband, like for him, it's grit. He's like that. He's most proud of my daughter and I when we're gritty. And I'm like, that's an interesting one. That's not necessarily one of my values, but I know that's really. And so she's like, yeah, I'm going to go take the groceries out of the car because that is his love language. Great. We start to know that about each other. Right. And
Yeah.
so we do look back and we can capture so much to work through and heal the trauma, but also to harvest like those dividends, right? The interest of our life experience that we can take forward because that worked. For some reason, we are still here.
Yeah, so it's always important to understand the value of what they've imparted to you, because
Yeah.
even with your grandfather is a way, you were 8 when he passed, but it's still in you.
Yeah.
Like the
Oh,
genes, like
100%.
all the spreadsheets and all the numbers, and like really do diligent about it in your ethos. Okay, this is
Yes.
why I am like
Yeah.
that and why I feel at home doing this. And
Yeah.
I love doing it, but I also want to be as good as or better or become the best of for the next generation.
100%. Because I was going to say, because in the end, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
right? It's that simple. It's like, and that's the big invitation here is how do we embody wealth? How do
Mm.
we feel wealthier, right? It doesn't mean adding one more penny to your bank account. How do you feel wealthier with what you have? I mean, that is the invitation. It's
Mm.
not at retirement. It's not at financial independence. Maybe at death. I can't speak to that one. But how do we feel wealthier today? I mean, that's the takeaway for
Mm.
us to ponder and be with. And I am 100% a proponent that you can feel wealthier today with what you have currently.
I think that just appreciating those moments and understanding all the different chapters that you put forward in a way that, like, let's dig deeper. You don't have to dig too far, but you need to figure out what your relationship with money is and how
Yeah.
you would treat yourself as a counterpart to mirror yourself and understand how we
Yeah.
want to be treated in a relationship. Don't have expectations because they're dangerous, but also understand that you need to know how to treat yourself because you are the catalyst for the money to find you in a
A
way.
100%. Yeah. And if those expectations come, take ownership for them, right? Like that was one of the biggest takeaways in my first conversation with money was like, whoa, I was putting so much expectation, undue expectation on money. Money very carefully and very quickly pointed that back at me. I'm like, oh, geez, that's my responsibility to take ownership for. And I think that's a big piece. We scapegoat money a lot. And
Mm.
part of it is like, no, how about we start to own what our human patterns and behaviors are? Because that's when we start to really change them.
Yeah. Deep work and
Yeah.
also shadow work that you mentioned, all those things, very
Yeah.
understanding, just the building blocks to be a whole you and understand that, like, you're in this moment. This is your journey in your life. I have a hard time with people going, oh, when I retire, I'll do this and that. Okay. You know what, if something happens, like, are you still enjoying the moment to do what you want and need now? Because you're going to miss out. Maybe you don't have the finances, but is it that much money that you need to do what you want to do? Or is it just the idea
Yeah.
of it rather than the
Yeah.
concept?
Yeah. And the reality is working with so many clients around financial planning. I mean, retirement never looks like what we think, right? Because a lot
Mhm.
of times we get there and a spouse has died. We're not as healthy as we think, right? And so it's more, I think and I think this is a good thing. I think our relationship to retirement is changing. It's actually a very new concept in the whole kind of span of humanity, right? It's very like, 1935, Social Security was invented, and this idea of like I can retire. I think there's a reason for that Social Security pension, especially during that older age. But we were retiring at 65 back then, and longevity was 67. Now we're retiring at 67, and longevity is more our mid 80s, right? That's a
Yeah.
different time horizon. That's important to point out because back in the day, I mean, I think of my grandparents. My grandparents didn't retire; they kept working until they were able-bodied. And then one died immediately, and one, got cancer and had to step away from work. But it's a different, like I think if we take the longer approach around sustainability, right? What's the sustained method of building resources, both monetary and non-monetary resources in our lives for a life of meaning and fulfillment? We're less in a rush to get somewhere because we're feeling that meaning and fulfillment today. And we're making those micro adjustments throughout our lives to potentially bring a little bit more passion and purpose and creativity to what we're doing. I mean, to your point around, I'm going to prove my dad wrong, right? You're like, I'm going to bring creativity to everything I do, is kind of the subtext that I heard. And maybe that was a longer path than he had envisioned for you, but it might be a more fulfilling path in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I get joy from it. So more joy for me, and I enjoy what I do. And so it's a difference that I'm willing to invest if the money's not coming up first, because joy is the purpose rather than
Yeah.
financial element that will find itself in time. I have more patience about it. And just like tiny businesses that I've owned during the past have had their moments that I enjoyed the elements that they were and took away great skills by daring a course that is outside their perspective of what they have focused on. So I got their tutelage from them and I learned a lot of
Right.
skills, but then I took it to a different direction than they are familiar with. So it all has a point of realization. And when we're going back to the idea of retirement, and you don't want to get to a place, and I say this for me and most people, to find yourself in regret.
Right. Exactly.
So you missed your moment,
Yeah.
you missed your chance, you missed your thing. You had all these guidelines and parameters in place, but you didn't do what you needed to do. That would be
Yeah.
very abysmal for me and maybe most people that you have settled for something that you didn't really want. So,
100%. And if I were to add one thing there, Jasmine, I just really want to highlight is that as you're talking, I mean, I love it. As you're talking about how your path has brought you so much joy, right? And probably a lot of hard work, but joy, right? I have no doubts you seem to be someone who's really hardworking. What I was going to say is that make sure you carve out time to sit down and have a conversation with money and be like, hey, money, let me roll up the sleeves. This is what you and I are doing, right? This is
mhm.
what I was taught. This is what they taught me. And some of those things I've decided to take on, some do not apply to me. But let's get super clear. What are you and I doing? Because we're designing our life differently together. And then, I mean, I'm just pointing out, to me, it feels like the obvious, but we're not taught to do that because then you start to feel that you're not alone in this design and implementation of a life that's different than what was taught to you because you and money are doing something together. And that is key, right? You're saying, I'm going to take my relationship to money and make it intentional and
Mhm.
not feel that, oh my gosh, yeah, I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but it's kind of out of the box compared to what they want me to be doing. And who's right, right? Money, or you should be over there. And it's like, and they have their own relationship to money. It's almost like trying to put ourselves in other people's marriages. It doesn't work. You have to have your own marriage. And so I really want to emphasize as you continue to really stand in that joy and pride of the way you've crafted your path, make sure you take time to talk to money and include money in that because it's really the two of you on that journey together.
A wise statement and a good understanding and a great reminder for me. I am a workaholic. So, when we talk about investing in myself, I was like, okay, break time. And you're like, shut down the spreadsheet, go away. Like, you need to
Yeah.
be here and not be work immersed so much. And I learned that the hard way, but I still
Yeah.
am working on it. It's good. So, I want to ask the last two questions always, what is the best advice you've ever received?
So the best advice I ever received came from a mentor of mine. His name is Satish Kumar. I was at Schumacher College in the UK and I was in my early 20s and I was just struggling with how can economics and finance and spirituality and psychology go together. They felt like totally different worlds and these were my two passions. And he was old then and older now, but this wise Indian mentor. He looked at me and he said, "Elizabeth, don't try so hard. Go to the root of the word economics and go within." And what he was telling me is that, again, economics is the management of resources. And so go within to understand what that really means. And I have taken that wisdom and that advice throughout my whole life. When something's feeling hard, I give myself permission to step away, not try to control it as much, not try so hard, go within. What are some of those deeper root connections that I can make that potentially show me something different? So I've been practicing that for 20 years now.
Great understanding and a great concept to really kind of hit home in that,
Yeah.
like just how, two philosophies merge together, which you're doing, which I'm always impressed by. I'm still like, going through, I will reread it multiple times, so I know that. So so on to my last and final question. What is the key takeaways from the hardest moment in your life that you went away learning something invaluably true and really important for you?
So the hardest year in my life was when I was 27 and I went through a very fast divorce. And it was fast, it was furious. And, it's one of these things where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't wish that on anyone. And I know that there's many people who've been through divorce listening to this conversation. But the key takeaway was when I made the decision, because all parts of me knew that I needed to step out of this relationship and turn towards another relationship that was calling to me at that moment. When I did that key decision, I very vividly knew that the life that I always wanted was at my fingertips. And I had to walk through fire to claim that life. And I feel very fortunate that in, 10 years later, I've been able to really understand that I love my life. I love so many aspects of it. I'm not shy in sharing about that. It's had its hardships, right? My second marriage, being a mom, all these things, but I love my life and I had to go through fire to get there.
Some of the best things in life are worth fighting for and worth playing to
100%.
find them. So I
Yeah.
applaud you, and I'm happy that you're in love with your life and enjoying it. And it's always a privilege to have someone like you, Elizabeth Husserl. You are an amazing writer. I really enjoyed it. Please, everyone, pick up the books. All the notes and her website are included in the bio. Check her out and find her. We hope to hear about your next speaking appearance. So please stay informed. But the power of enough, finding your joy in your relationship with money. And I hope everyone picks it up and figure out their own relationship with their money. Thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been such a joy to have this conversation and for everything you shared. I appreciate you coming forth so candidly and so forthcoming and with such creativity and joy. It's really a gift that you offer people. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Tranquility Magazine podcast. Please subscribe and add your questions to our Q&A. We want to give a thank you to our team for their effort in creating every episode and our content at tranquilitymagazine.com.